Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nikon Creators Hour. My name is Mike Corrado. I've been with Nikon for over 35 years, and I've been shooting for over 40 years, and we wanted to continue to bring great content through the month of June to you during these times where we're isolated through the pandemic. We have all kinds of Nikon Creators Hour content. We've got contests, we've got challenges, we've got tips from ambassadors, we've got all kinds of content on the website, so check that out. With us right now, we have Michelle Valberg, a Canadian Nikon ambassador. How are you, Michelle?
I'm awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing during these times? How are you and your husband coping?
We're doing really well, actually. My husband's a fire chief and he's still working. And I'm doing pretty good. I'm really busy for not really working. So keeping busy with some personal projects and shooting as much as I can, trying to stay creative. And I think that's the hardest part right now is just getting that inspiration and really connecting and getting out there and creating.
Well, those of you tuning in that may not know this, Michelle Valberg is an incredible wildlife photographer and conservationist. She's part of the Canadian Geographic Society's Photographer in Residence program, a fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographic Society. I'm bragging on you, Michelle, if you don't mind. And she's traveled to all continents in search of her passion for wildlife photography and making images. So you've got a great body of work. You have your own collection of wildlife stamps, bears. So I guess in wildlife, you have the opportunity to still stay isolated and go out. Because quite honestly, I saw a picture of you wearing this lens or this cover that goes over your body. So I had to buy one right away so I can capture some really cool wildlife photos. But talk about your life and how you got started in photography, why wildlife over any other genre. And then, of course, the toughest task we gave you was to put together a collection of 7 or so images. Maybe we'll get a bonus out of you today. And we're going to talk about the backstories to all those. But let's get started with who you are as a photographer, where it started, and where you are now.
I, like you, have been photographing for over 30 years. And that's really hard to imagine us even saying that, right? Like that word, like 30 years. I've been lucky to do photography for my entire career. I really wanted to be a golf pro, but anyway, I decided photography was a better avenue. And I have been following my passion ever since. But as a new photographer, as an emerging photographer, I went to Ottawa U and then in the Fine Arts program, and then I went to Algonquin College to get more of the technical skills. I started my business throughout the university. I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to be self-employed. So when I finished school, I started my business, but like everyone else who wants to make a living in photography, I kind of had to do everything. My passion was always wildlife. Of course, I was one of those people that said, I want to be that geo photographer, right? Well, it kind of takes the time to get there and the experience, and I had to do whatever I could to make a living. So I actually started with video. I did video production way back. It was very, very different then, and then slowly emerged into the photography world. But I did weddings, I did events, I did corporate videos, I did insurance videos. I transferred 8mm and 16mm film and slides, and I put slides to music. And we at one point, because we were doing video and photography, we were doing 115 weddings a year. It was insane. And I was working like 90-hour weeks every single day. Not that that's changed very much now, but it was incredible. But what it did is it gave me an opportunity to learn how to think fast, how to work with people, how to manage time, how to manage people, how to create, think quickly. And oftentimes you don't have the opportunity to stage things, right? With weddings, it happens, you got to be ready. And it's a lot like that with wildlife photography. So I did books on people. So I've been taking pictures of people for my entire career as well. So about 12 years ago, I had done a couple of books on people, and I decided after I had my child and he was a little older that I wanted to do a book on the environment, on Canada in particular, and what we have to lose if we don't take better care of our planet. So I set out, and I just knew I had to photograph polar bears. How could I not do a book? I had to get up to the Arctic. And in my mind, I thought the Arctic was, white, flat, cold. It was far. Really, I live in Ottawa, and the Arctic is 3 hours by plane straight up. Another 3 hours or 3.5, and you're on top of the world. It's not that far. And it's much more than being white and cold and flat. I'll tell you, it's so much more than that. So I made a call to a friend now. He's been a friend of mine ever since. And he answered questions about how to get up to the Arctic for me and how I was going to do this. And he suggested I go to the Floe Edge. So go to the Floe Edge. I didn't really know what that meant. So I thought, okay, well, we'll keep talking and I'll pretend like I know what he's talking about. What is the Floe Edge? And I will get into that story in my photos. But the next thing I knew, in 2 weeks' time, I was working for Canadian Above and Beyond magazine. I was working for Nunavut Tourism, and I was working for Adventure Canada. And it was just taking that call, and for him and I to have that conversation, to show my passion. And I didn't have a breadth, like a huge variety of wildlife animal photography, because I had been doing weddings and portraits, and I had started photographing in my cottage and that sort of thing. So my whole world changed 12 years ago when I was able to experience the Arctic. And I got up there, I saw my first polar bear, whales, I saw seals, walrus, I saw everything. And I stood there and waited for things to come to me. And I was just like, and I went with my first D1X. It was the first time shooting with a 500 megabyte micro drive, which is not very easy in major cold.
I remember those days.
Yeah,
Yep.
how finicky. I was also shooting, I was digiscoping with a telescope because I didn't have the big long lenses that I needed. And my father got me into digiscoping. Have you ever done that with birds?
No, I haven't, but spotting scopes, I've used the Nikon spotting scopes for sure.
So cool with the adapter. You adjust, you put your well, at the time, the D1X on, and you automatically default to f11. It's manual focus, but you also have like 1200 millimeters, right? So it's much cheaper, affordable way. But I got some amazing results for that.
Right.
What did you ask me? How did I get into photography? How's that for? So,
well, I mean, it's interesting to follow the path of everybody. I mean, because something triggers along the way, and you say, I'm going to dedicate myself. And I assume that trip up to the Arctic kind of changed everything for you, because you saw a world that you just needed to be immersed in.
Exactly.
And I think it's an amazing story. But you now, I mean, predominantly you do wildlife photography. I know towards the end we're going to talk about some portraits you've done. I don't want to hamstring you into being just a wildlife photographer, because you are a very versatile photographer on the whole. And we'll talk about these pictures as we go. Discipline in wildlife has got to be a big thing. Before we go to the pictures, just talk about that discipline you have for patience, for time, how you protect yourself going up to the Arctic. I like going to Florida to photograph the birds. It's easier, shorts and a tank top. But you got to protect yourself from the animals, the elements. So talk a little bit about that, how you take care of yourself as well as the gear to shoot in an Arctic temperature.
Yeah, you got to be super prepared, because if you're not taking care of yourself, I mean, I've been in situations where somebody's gotten frostbite, and then the frostbite got infected and they had to be airlifted out. I mean, no matter what, you have to look after yourself first. And, being obviously outer gear, making sure you have the layers on, making sure that you're fully covered. In -50 Celsius, I don't know what, I think that equals out with Fahrenheit at a certain point. I think -30 or something, it all becomes the same. It's
right.
cold. Just say it's freaking cold, right? So you're battling the elements, and you're also battling potential equipment issues like, freezing up, which honestly, in all my times, I've been to the Arctic 59 times now, my Nikons have never, ever disappointed. The only issues that I've ever had have been condensation rings that have occurred just because of the element changes. So sure. I'm telling you, and the battery life, everything, it's never disappointed. So, making sure that you have your right equipment, that you've got hand warmers, that you're able to have your batteries close to your body.
Right.
I've slept with batteries. I've had to sleep with them. yeah, just making sure that you're prepared, and then and that your equipment, that you're fully aware. You know, there's times that we've had to leave the equipment out, and you know, because we were photographing polar bears and we had a vehicle we could go in to get warm.
Let
We
it
had
stay
to leave our,
acclimated to the temperatures, right?
yeah, you have to leave it out, right? So I take out my battery, I take out my card, and then we'd go get warm, but there was no bringing in and out. With zoom lenses, a couple of times I've had a little bit because of some snow and seriously cold temperatures. It has, you know, obviously gotten in. So I find that a prime works a little bit better in those conditions because you're not constantly using the zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so just being really well prepared, or even I like going into other elements. I like being in the warm too. But just lately, I've been shooting with this full-on hide, you know, from top to bottom with the. Did you get
I
the?
love it.
Isn't it
You can
awesome?
stand like 3 feet from a bird, and the bird doesn't care.
Yeah.
But
And I've been
let's.
photographing the fox with it, and it's great because it has the mesh. You have a 360-degree view,
Mhm.
and you're able to unzip. You have a pocket, and you can just be and allow yourself to be with the animals without any disturbance or interruption.
Let's start to move forward with your images because I'm sure people are really craving to see, you know, what you produce. I love these images that you sent on. I have had a chance to preview them. So let me share the screen and start up this show. And we'll pull up the images full screen. You and I will get kicked off to the side, which is cool. I have to tell you, this picture makes me so jealous. And, you know, I'm from Long Island. I do a lot of the wildlife photography on Long Island. I've gone to, with Nikon Ambassador Keith Ledzinski, down to Florida a few times, our little Mecca trip, you know, when the birds are starting to, you know, mate and chicks are being born. But talk about this image. I want to know how you approached it, why this species of bird, and, you know, a little bit of the backstory about what you've done to get this image. It's a beautiful image.
Oh, thank you. It's one of my favorite. And it was really tough to choose 5 to 7 images, I have to say. And thank you for that challenge, because I think a lot of times what we do is we get into an image and it becomes extra, extra, extra special to you because of the elements, because of the time that it took to get there. You know, there's a personal story, whatever it is, they become very special to us. So when you can share that experience with why it is important to you, it's so great. So thank you for this opportunity. My family have a cottage on Charlotte Lake, Ontario, and we go up there every summer. A lot of the summer I spend up in the Arctic, so whatever time I have, I'm out in my kayak. And you know, it was a long time. We've been there for 18 years, 19 years, I guess. This is the season for 19. And a couple of times we had chicks born. Loons are my favorite. You know, their sound is so hauntingly beautiful, and they're such incredible birds. And we had a fishing boat, and it was very difficult to approach a loon with a fishing boat. They would always swim away. They're not interested in any motor or anything that you're doing. So I never really had an opportunity to spend up close and personal time with the loons. And um, one summer, 18, like not 18 years ago, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I guess. Um, we went for a boat ride, and we saw these chicks, and I was like, finally, and they're right across the bay from us. So it wasn't like I had to go, you know, on the other side of the lake to see them. They were right in our bay. And because we are protected in our area, we have a shoal, so a lot of boats don't come down in our area. They like to spend time around where we are, which is fantastic, right? So every morning I get up at 4:30 in the morning. I would be out there before the sun rose, and I would listen for their call. And this is where you have to be so intuitive, and you have to really listen. You have to really hear. You have to use all of your senses. And I went out and I heard them. I went forward towards them, and they were very, very accepting of me because I had spent so much time already with them. And they had these new chicks. They were days old. It started to rain, and I had this magical moment of beautiful light, a soft rain, and this connection between these parents and this chick. And I think ultimately with wildlife photography, we were always searching for that connection. And Michael, you and I were talking about the other day with bird photography and with your backyard photography and how you're waiting for that specific moment to happen because you know you've seen it, but you haven't been able to capture it. This was a dream come true for me.
I just, you know, we always say this, patience is the most important thing in all this, because you can, I mean, time disappears. I've found hours just go by like that while you're waiting, and it is important to wait for the moment. And what I love here is everything is in its place, right? And I'm sure, you know, most people are going to say, oh, you shoot the one picture. I openly admit, and I'm sure you do too, shoot a lot of pictures to get that one moment. But when that moment is perfect with, you know, the food, the worm, the baby is so clear, you know, just resting on top of the parent, that it all comes together. What was the focal length for this shot?
I was at I was using the 2 to 500. So I was at the full 500 millimeter. And that was really my go-to lens, the 200 to 500, which I absolutely adore. But then I picked up the 500 PF, and I haven't really gone back to the 200 to 500 for a while. Just because, especially in the kayak, you know, I have a really sturdy fishing kayak that I can put my tripod up. I can have 2 cameras, and I can stand. Like I can stand. There's no, you know, there's no.
I was going to ask, because I'd be so afraid to go out on a kayak and fear flipping, you know, into the water with the gear. But obviously, this is a bigger kayak than I'm envisioning.
Oh yeah, it's huge, and it weighs 85 pounds, and I don't go out in crazy weather. Even if I did, I would feel comfortable. But I do, because the water comes up, you have to have a dry bag. You have to make sure, you know, you have a towel. Last weekend, I was so thankful. I have a little back pocket behind me. I was so thankful that I had bug spray from last year because I forgot to put it in. The bugs have just started to come out. But this year it's different. You know, I've spent a lot of time with this one pair, and I know it's the same pair. And it might be because they're starting to nest, or they're trying to figure out where they're going to nest on our lake. And last weekend, they didn't want to have anything to do with me. It was quite interesting. So you really, as well, if you have the time and the opportunity, you have to create a relationship almost with these animals, that they feel protected, that you're not going to harm them. And enough that they would leave me the chicks. Sometimes they would leave me to go hunt with the chicks. And I'm like, oh my God, don't leave me with your babies. But, you know, it takes time. So that's part of the patience as well. It's not just waiting for the shot. It's anticipating and then allowing that relationship to build, so there is trust and you're able to get into a closer proximity, maybe that helps get that better shot. And also with a kayak, what I was missing with the fishing boat is, because I was up a little bit higher, with the kayak you're so low, the beautiful vantage point, when you really feel like you're a part of this family, you're a part of this image.
And that's critical to this image too, because if you come up from a high angle, you lose that foliage in the background, which is such a nice fluorescent green, you know, as if you're just laying a beautiful backdrop out there. So if you go higher, that's a disadvantage for you, and certainly waiting in the water, or, you know, being at that low angle is pretty phenomenal. And the good news, in the backyard, I can actually place plates down and put the cameras on the ground. Obviously, you have to hand hold out here on the lake, but it's a great image to start off with. It's one of my favorites of yours. And again, it's a test of patience, waiting for the right moment, and understanding the elements and the birds you're photographing, your subjects. I think that becomes critical. So as we move on, again, we are in the Arctic. I know this is one of your favorite places to be and create photos. Talk about this image and the impact it has on you.
Yeah, when you said 5 to 7 images, and then I have to have a polar bear. I mean, the polar bears are what changed, and I'm absolutely obsessed with them. But I had to find an image, and I sent you one that was a little bit different from the same location. And then I went back and I said, no, this is it, because the story behind this is so incredible. It was one of the scariest moments that I've had. I don't recommend it to anybody. But we were, I was testing out, I was one of the first visitors to this bear camp between Churchill and Arvia at Nunavut. And and we took an otter and we landed on the tundra. And as we were circling around the camp, there were only 3 cabins. We saw a polar bear on the beach, and I was like, "Oh, this is so exciting!" And my girlfriend came with me, Leanne. You met her at CES, and she had never seen a polar bear before. So I was like, "Yay!" So she's going to see her first polar bear. This is amazing. And we landed on the tundra, and we were taking stuff out of the plane. I had the 24-70 on my other camera. I always have 2 cameras. These days 3. I usually shoot with 2 Z7s and a Z6. This is when the D4 stage, the D3X, and so I always have 2 cameras, one with a shorter lens, one with a longer lens. And I was in the plane, so I had the 24-70. So I knew that there was a bear around, so I said, "Oh, I got to get the 500 out." And I had packed my 500 into the 200, 400, 2 to 400 case because I didn't have a case for the 500. So it was really hard to pull out. And Leanne said, "Well, the bear, it's there." And oh, okay, great. The guys are on, our guides are unpacking the plane, and I'm like, "I gotta get the 500 on. I'm gonna photograph a polar bear." And so I'm pulling it out, and I tried to get it out of the case, and she's like, "There's a bear." I'm like, "I know there's a bear, but there's a bear." I'm like, "Yeah, I need to get my 500. I finally get it out, put it on my camera. Now I'm hand holding it because I don't have time to put it on a tripod. And the bear starts to approach, and he just kept getting closer and closer. And you're looking through your lens. If you're wildlife, it doesn't matter. When you're connected with your subject, you're not taking your eyes off, and you're waiting and waiting for that perfect moment. And I hadn't realized how close he was getting until I was full frame. until the bear was like, this was full frame. I'm like, "Okay, dude, you're a little close. Can you back up a little bit?" And meanwhile, Leanne and the pilot are now in a door frame. I don't even know what my surroundings are. Like, I don't even know where a door is. I just know now I'm behind my guide who has a gun, and the bear's only 20 feet from him. And anyway, the story ends up, it's all good. Everyone know the bear didn't come to any harm. We didn't either. But I was standing 20 feet behind him. He was only my guide and 20 feet from the bear. And this bear was relentless. I mean, it's fall. They're waiting for the ice to come in. They haven't eaten in months. It looks like this guy maybe had a few meals in between. He was so big. And we're their predator. They're our predator. They're carnivores. They're interested in and very curious animals and hungry. So before I knew it, the bear sat down. Guide turned around. I couldn't shoot my 500 anymore, so I was shooting my 24-70 of him holding the gun. And he turns around and he looks at me. He goes, "Okay, the bear's going to charge. I have to fire a ground shot. Are you done taking pictures?" Like, dude, I figure I might as well take pictures. It's either going to be the last picture I take, or it's going to be a good story. So it was crazy. And so I had to choose this one just because it's just not the typical shot I think that you would think that I would show of a polar bear.
Well, it's a great story, and I think it's a great lesson. I mean, several things. Obviously, safety first, and being with a guy that understands the animals. And I would think the shotgun is to scare them or just to hear an alert, so they back off a little bit in case they get too close, and no harm is done, of course. And again, it's a great story. I think it talks to you too about why maybe a 2 to 500 over a fixed 500. You never know, right? I mean, when you need the length. And you need that distance and the extra focal length, then things come in so close. So, but more important that you are safe.
Sorry, that's not always a bad thing either when things come close, right? Or you can, if you're stuck with what you have, either if it's a wide angle and you need closer, or if you've got a longer lens and you're too close, like it can really shift, and that challenge can become really awesome to be able to be creative, right, with what your limitations are.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Plus, I think it creates you a discipline that pushes you to be a better photographer, to work within an element of 1 degree, an angle of view that's just so tight, like you say, to see things and expose things within a frame that are just pretty phenomenal. All right, as we move on, talk about this image. It's so beautiful. Looks like it's early morning, but I could be wrong. But beautiful, beautiful picture. Talk about this.
Okay, so when I was working on my book on, it became a book on the Arctic, not on Canada. I went to the Arctic, everything changed. I was actually, at the time that I took this, I was supposed to be on a Northwest Passage cruise with Adventure Canada. The ship that I was going on got grounded, so time opened up for me. And one of the animals that I hadn't photographed yet was the walrus. And so I spent the time researching, trying to find if there was any walrus around Nunavut, and if I could try to find a herd anywhere. And it was like, yeah, one of those fortuitous calls. Found out that there was a researcher that was working on an island near Hull Beach, Nunavut, and there was a herd of 10,000 walrus. And they were still there. So I called up another girlfriend and I said, hey, how's it going? You want to go to the Arctic and photograph walrus? And she's like, sure. So off we went. It was really that simple. I was just like, okay, this is where we've got to go. And when we landed in Hull Beach and got to the hotel, we found out that our guide had gone hunting. So he offered up a friend of his, or his uncle, I think, and put on our survival suits and went out, I guess, about an hour and a half to this island. And when we arrived and we were getting closer, like you could smell before you could see. 10,000 walrus were blanketing the island and swimming in the water. And it blew my mind. But it was a kind of a grayish kind of day, which wasn't bad. They were exposed. So I was like, okay, slight overcast. This is actually working. This is great. So when we landed, we walked up. And because, of course, again, I had never photographed a walrus, let alone 10,000 of them. How do you even approach this? Mm-hmm. And there was this cliff that you can see on the left side of the image. So our guides kept us quite a distance away. And then we walked up to the ledge and we were looking down, which was a great vantage point. Unlike being with the loons where you're low, or the polar bear, this was looking down, not this image, but the images that I was taking, and you could see the interaction between the moms and the cubs, and but it was overwhelming. And I think when you're seeing so many animals in one place, if you're lucky enough, you really have to kind of zoom in, no pun intended on that one. You really have to, you have to find maybe one or two that you can focus in on, because otherwise it's just overwhelming. And that's what I did the other day with the blue herons. And a friend of mine said, wow, you really just kind of zoom in on a nest and really spend your time there. So that's what I was doing up there, seeing behavior. And then when we were all done, I'd taken thousands of images and stuff. I said to the guy, do you think that we could walk up to their level? I'd love to see, because I'm always wanting to be low, right? We're always wanting to be low with wildlife.
And close.
And can we walk up to them and look at them from the ground? So we did. It took us like an hour to walk up. We were in these big red suits, and there was this large one on the end, and he and I were kind of having a conversation with our eyes, and was like, okay, I'm not here to hurt you. You're not here to hurt me. But it was flat light, and it was a blanket, right? So I didn't really have any depth. And that's one thing that we're always looking for as well. Like you said about the forest, or like the trees in the background of the loon. I'm always looking for depth and to show the animals not only close up, but in their environment. So I was like, okay, this just isn't working. So I was hand holding the 200 to 400, and I had, I think, the 70 to 2 on the other camera, 24-70, I can't remember. And it was a 2 to 4 that I was trying to create with. And then we started to walk away. And this is one of the things, and I shot manual and I still shoot manual, but I shoot manual focus for before mirrorless, actually. But this, in the Arctic, you have to have all your senses alive. And I think that's any case when you're out in nature, but this in particular, we're in the Arctic in particular, because there could be danger, because you might be walking on the ice, your senses are alive. So we were walking back to the boat, and all of a sudden I heard this thunderous sound, and I turned around. I didn't know what was happening. I just started shooting. And that's the thing, like, especially with digital now, we can just take that opportunity and shoot. Like, you're not worrying about how many frames you have left on your roll of film or anything like that. And I just took an opportunity and just fired off a bunch of shots. I didn't even know what I was seeing. But what happened was the walrus were spooked. And they're not sure why. Maybe it was a polar bear, but this walrus were spooked. So they all went on this thunderous herd into the water. And the sun had just kind of peeked through the clouds. So it was like the perfect storm, so to speak. So I had all of a sudden depth and texture in the clouds and a little bit of light. But what the mist is, or what a lot of people think is the mist, is the sandstone dust from underneath them that just rose because of their thunderous big, they're 2,500 pound monsters that are beautiful monsters, creatures that are running. So it was like the perfect storm of everything, because now I had movement, I had this beautiful light, I had depth, I had, with the cliff even giving an edge to the frame, and
Sure.
it became as mystical as they are. So it's been one of those key images for me, for sure.
It's beautiful, beautifully done. Thank you for sharing that story. We're back in the cold.
Yeah.
Certainly on a boat, I would think. Another gorgeous image. What took you to making this picture? How did you come to this photo?
So I was talking about the Floe Edge. I was actually standing on the edge of the ice. The Floe Edge is where the ice ends and the open floor begins, right? So the next stop is
Gotcha.
Green. Yeah. So the ice is probably about 2 feet thick, and at this time of spring, it starts to break off, right, and move out. And when it breaks off, it becomes this plethora of food for all these animals, like the polar bear, and these are narwhal, beluga, bowhead, seals, walrus, birds galore. It's what it makes it's so magical. And to see narwhal, to see the unicorn of the sea, to see them in this herd was just absolutely mind-blowing. And I had photographed the narwhal. This was about my 3rd trip to the Floe Edge. And oftentimes they were just open water, right? You're on the edge. This is where a pool created by the ice moving out and then moving back in, as you can see, the levels of the ice. So I had this beautiful background, which really put it into context. It's where it is. You're obviously in the Arctic. You're obviously in the cold waters of the Arctic Ocean. And I chose this one just because the narwhal, one of the most incredible experiences that I've ever had, is I actually got in the water and swam with them. And
No kidding.
no kidding. I jumped into the Arctic Ocean, Mike. And this, photography brings us so much opportunity. It brings us opportunity. It makes us see differently. And I thought the guys that I were with were crazy because they were going in the water. And then they asked me if I wanted to go, and I said, "Oh, okay, sure. I'll completely go out of every part of my comfort zone, and I'll jump in the water with narwhal. Why not?" And it became way more than photography. It became about reaching something that you never imagined yourself doing, and getting out of that box and getting out of your comfort zone. And it was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had.
It's amazing how that happens too, and I think with anything you get into photographically, you go through these stages, right, where you'll start off and you make pictures and you'll be wowed, and then all of a sudden you realize, like a little while down the road, it's not as wow as you thought it was, because something even bigger wow happens.
Right.
But you're right, it's about the experience too. Again, just a little bit of studies in the backyard, just watching behaviors and things like that. All of this detail that is sitting there right in front of me when I walk out my back door, and I don't pay attention to it until I'm in quarantine, and all of a sudden I want to stay creative. So what you're saying to me, it's just so important to understand that when you're out there, especially in wildlife photography, it's like you have this front row seat to nature, right? And you're bringing back these pictures that not many people can see, with the right lenses, with your vision, with your creativity, certainly. And it's amazing to be that close to something I probably in my lifetime may never get that close to. And then, I see a picture like this, and to carry on with whales, it's just exceptional. I mean, it's like eye candy to me, the kind of picture I could stare at for a while. So is this when you got in the water, or is this a totally different time? What's going on here?
I love going south too. I have to say, as much as I love going to the north, I'll go anywhere in this world. But this is in Dominican Republic, so this is in 75-degree water. A lot different than the Arctic Ocean. But
Sure.
like feet away. This is taken with a 14 millimeter, and I wasn't able to get the full whale in. So it tells you how close you are. And again, it's one of those stories, you know, or one of those experiences that was just, it exercised absolutely everything: my creativity, my technical skills, my out of comfort, jumping in the water with these massive creatures. What a gift! What an incredible honor to be underwater with humpback whales and narwhal. Like, it just goes beyond anything I ever imagined that I would do as a photographer. But it's everything that goes along with it as well that makes the image that much more special, because it was one of the hardest images I ever had to create because of all the elements. It wasn't just like being in the cold. That's one thing. It was battling these massive waves. I've got 10 other people with me at the same time. And this humpback was new to the Dominican. They migrate down into this area. There's about 7,000, I think they estimate, that migrate into this area. And they're there to breed and to calve. So this was a new arrival, and you could see because of his barnacles, he had the cold water barnacles still on him. So he had this massive trip down from the Arctic, or from northern Canada to Dominican, and he was really tired, and he was sleeping, and he was just kind of logging on the surface. And yeah, and then he would roll, and it was when he rolled that bubble created, the torrent created that bubble. But again, I was just so busy trying to create, I didn't even see that bubble. I was just like, you know, trying to survive. I was just trying to, you know, stay above water, and because you're snorkeling, you're not actually diving with them. You're snorkeling, you're on top of the water. It was incredible, and never again something I thought I would have the experience of doing.
How close are you in proximity to the whale?
Oh, there were times we were like 5 feet to 10. Like what happens is they're very, you're never with a whale. We in our situation that it's usually sleeping. So whales will actually go underwater, and they will go down about 30 feet, and they will sleep, and they turn off half their brain. So they go down. They're sleeping, and then if they have a calf, the calf will come up every 8 to 10 minutes, and then the female will come up every 10 to 15. But when you go into the water with your guide, most important, you're over top of sleeping whales, and then you wait for them to rise up to the surface. And that alone, like, you're getting into the water and you're looking down at a whale, you're going, oh my God, I'm over top of a whale. This whale is going to come up. But they know, they're fully aware that you're there. And if they don't want to be around you, like any animal, if they don't want to be around you, they're not going to stick around. They're gonna swim away. So I mean, that's the other thing, is understanding that when an animal leaves, like the loons on the lake with me last weekend, they didn't want to have anything to do with me. So I went, okay, and I'll see you next weekend, and we'll work on it again.
Yeah, that's the toughest thing I found, is to sort of cash it in and say, I have to be done at this point, because you just feel like that next moment is about to happen, and it becomes quite addictive at that point. So, you know, especially in these environments, I mean, you're out there in the water protecting the camera, or, you know, holding it over the ledge into the water. And you just see things. To me, then, if something weird happens, instead of saying, okay, good, I got it, it's time to move on, I feel like, oh, wow, that was great. Maybe there's a better moment to come. And you can't back off. But I found that sometimes I have to give myself time limits, that if nothing's happening, I got to break away from it mentally, just to start to refocus and say, okay, what am I going after, and what am I trying to do here? But this is, again, another one of those extraordinary images. And again, it's funny because you see it in its totality. You see the swoosh of water, and didn't know that the whale was rolling here. But then to see the barnacles and hear the story about the barnacles is priceless to me, because, you know, that speaks a lot about this journey. You don't think about the fact that they've come that far to get to where they are, and you're there to capture that. That's beautiful. All right, I love this image. Take it away. What's going on here?
I spoke about this at CES, one of the most beautiful, magical places on this planet. the Great Bear Rainforest in British Columbia. I've been fortunate to be able to visit there numerous times. And this is a spirit bear. It's a Kermode bear. And it's a black bear with a recessive gene. So it's not albino. And it's the only place in the world that you can see these bears. And the indigenous legend says that the raven made every 10 bears a white bear to remind the world of the Ice Age. And there are specific places on this river that you can see them if you're lucky. And of course, we know as wildlife photographers, we don't always get lucky. And I've been skunked many, many times, and I get to show you 5 and 7 or to 7 of these, lucky moments. And, I had gone down to the river. We knew that this guy was nicknamed Boss because he's the boss of the river. There were 9 black bears around us at the same time. I had the 800 millimeter on a tripod. I had the 500 millimeter and the 70-200. I was armed and ready. And I had think tank covers all over my cameras because it's raining, pouring back. You're in the rainforest, right? And I got down to the river's edge. I went right into the water, into the rocks and at the water's edge. And Boss would come up and he would feed on the salmon. And so that was really fun. And you know what? That's when I took the 800. I was really close to him. He's habituated, so he's used to seeing humans on the river. So he was very fine with us around. And it really didn't pay any attention whatsoever. And he would put his head down underwater and come up and look at us, and he would be searching for the salmon. And then he came over and he stood right in front of me. Well, there are other people around, but of course it's always you, right? And he would put his head under the water, and for quite some time, and I hadn't seen this behavior before, and then he would look up and then he would shake his head. What he's doing was he was licking the roe off of the bottom of the river or the rocks and eating the salmon roe. And so he would be head down, swishing away, and then all of a sudden he would look up and he would shake. And the first time I had my 500 on, I was too close, and then I picked up my 70-200, and I was like, oh, I missed it. I missed the shot. I can't believe it. I had too much lens. I should have, so I'm beating myself up. And then he goes and he does it again. And then he did it again. It was crazy. And the dark forest background illuminated the water like they're stars or diamonds, and then getting that perfect head movement, right? A lot of frames. So I was really glad because my Z6 it had the 70-200 on. I was able to fire off a few more frames a second than the 7, and I got it. Like I took quite a bit, and then I was able to do video, which was super awesome because then I'm able to show the video, right, to complement what it was like to see him do this.
I think that's a big important element to bring up here, because I found myself doing that a lot. I've never looked at myself as a filmmaker, although, through directing and camera operating, different Nikon projects. But I feel like every once in a while, break away from the still to capture some video. And I put the Z on the 5X slow motion, where it produces a slow motion movie in camera as a feature. And, I think it's so important to slow down wildlife, especially in these moments, because you see more details. But I want to like sort of reiterate that the importance of understanding the behaviors and the repetition of the things that they do at certain times a day. And you think you miss it, but if you're patient enough, you realize they're doing it for a reason. And, whether it's the birds preening on the lake in the afternoon, looking for that backlight, and that dark background means everything. The water, you don't do this, when you've got lighting in the background that lights everything up, because then those dots of water are just sort of disappearing into nowhere, or the colors in the background. So again, waiting for the right moment. And like you said, the head had to be in the right position, right? Or else you weren't going to be satisfied. And then it happens a couple of times. And again, I feel that feeling. Well, it's happened 4 times now. It's going to happen a 5th. We can't leave until it happens 10 times. And then on the 10th time, if I feel like I haven't really gotten it, it's, let's stay here. It's hard. It's really hard to know when to move on.
Really
but this is beautifully done. And to think, go ahead.
It's also watch your vantage point, like really get low all the time. And what I see
Mm-hmm.
are people where they're standing, which a lot of times
Yep.
people aren't able to get low. But even that tilt screen on the mirrorless, oh my goodness, like how amazing is that? Because you don't have to lie down on the ground anymore. But really, really getting low and being able to be eye to eye. That's the other thing I'm always
Mm-hmm.
looking for is that eye to eye contact. So, so important.
Yeah, like you say, being able to flip the mirror, to me, it spares my back and my knees
Yeah, I
from
know,
getting
right?
on the ground. Doing a
Yeah.
lot of low angle stuff like that, it becomes a great, great feature. So
So
we are
when you
doing
are,
well.
sorry,
Go
Mike,
ahead.
when you are low though, are you able to are you using the screen, the pop-out screen? Like
All right, so I may have frozen there for a second. Were you
yeah, you
asking
did.
me a question? That's okay. Welcome to live, broadcast.
I
Yeah.
asked if you were using the tilt screen.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, all the time. I mean, again, it's the
Yeah.
better way of being able to do things, and I can see it from different angles. And again, you're talking about the camera maybe being a foot off the ground, maximum, with these kinds of shots. So, but yes, we freeze every once in a while. It's a cool thing. I just hope I wasn't frozen in one of those contorted faces.
No,
You know.
you were looking down.
Oh God. Beautiful, beautiful image. What do we have going on here? Where did you take it? Why did you take it? And what lens did you use? How did you get there? I need to know it all.
Oh my goodness, Uganda, it was a dream come true. And when our world changed, I was lucky enough to experience this like a month before. COVID turned our world upside down. And if somebody had asked me what was one of the places that I would want to go or for what animal I wanted to photograph more than anything that I hadn't yet, it was the gorillas and the chimps. And so yeah, it happened in the end of February. It was one of the hardest shoots I've ever experienced. I don't get seasickness at all, which is a real gift because I spent a lot of time on the water in the Arctic, but I happen to get altitude sickness. And I was only at 7,000 feet, but it doesn't matter with me. Like I'm just useless in altitude. And who was somebody was talking about the mountain goats that the altitude you had on. And
Oh, Ron McGill.
yeah, Ron, oh, I totally related. I like, anyway, but I also had these massive headaches. I had severe nausea. I lose my breath. And yeah, so just battling all of that. And then we had to hike 3.5 hours to reach this family. Every time we got closer to them, they moved off
Hmm.
or they moved away from us. So 3.5 hours, which is not too bad. Everybody reacts differently to different elements. Unfortunately for me, I'm just terrible at altitude. And so it was okay. I was doing all right. But we were climbing mountains and I was like, okay, this isn't too bad. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, we found the family. And my backpack was on my porter under a raincoat because it was just starting to pour. The thunder started to pound. And I don't like thunderstorms either. Okay, so altitude sickness. I hate storms. It's pouring rain. My camera is in the backpack of my porter. I have to get it out. I only have an hour. It was incredibly stressful. And fortunately, my friend said, "Okay, let me just hold the raincoat over top. You can get your camera out." I had taken off my lens coat cover because it wasn't raining. Never do that. Always be prepared. As much as we have all this experience, we still make major mistakes, right? Or we
Hmm.
make decisions that just make sense for the time. It's just, it doesn't necessarily work out for the best for you. So fortunately, I'm grateful to Chris who actually helped me get my camera ready. And then next thing you know, we're shooting this family in the pouring rain with thunder. So it was my first experience. Like this is something that's come true, right? So I'm like crying inside. I can't wait to cry outside because I'm just overwhelmed with emotion. And this beautiful blackback was in front of us, and he was making his bed, and he was picking his nose, and he was farting, and he was just sitting there staring at us, and literally like it was just, you're looking at these creatures going, okay, we are them. Like their mannerisms, their everything, their way that they looked at you, that eye to eye, that they, it was like they were looking through your soul, you know. And so I was able to fire off quite a bit. I did get some video in, which was great, of the bear, see, of the gorilla rubbing his back, which was fantastic, trying to show the behavior. And you know, I just, this image just spoke to me just because of the eye. He's holding a branch, he's eating, and you just lead in. And it's not a crop that I typically do. It's an image that I wouldn't say is my regular type of wildlife image, but it was one that just really spoke to me. And I hope it speaks to everybody else the same. But what it goes back to, right? We all have our own stories behind our images, and we know what it takes to get there. And I know what my body had to go through. I spent the whole week there, ill. Imagine I couldn't drink for the whole week in this beautiful all-inclusive, and the food was magnificent. And anyway, I was eating ginger pills, I was eating gravel, I was having my anti-altitude sickness, I was eating malaria pills, like my whole awful. And everybody looked after me. I had such a great group of people that they came with me. I was supposed to be looking after them, and they all just took such great care of me.
Yeah, I think you bring up the great point of people don't understand what you're physically going through while you're waiting, the excitement, the emotion. You know, I can associate with that. I can relate to that. And you walk into these moments and you're emotionally connected to the animal. You're emotionally connected to being in a place you've always wanted to be. And then I think it clicks in that the time is so limited. And I always treat these types of situations that you'll never know when you're going to make it back there, right? So you look at it as your one-time opportunity. And if you get 20 times, you are blessed, you are happy, but take it one step at a time. And you get emotionally connected to this. And, you know, the elements are never seen in the photos unless, you know, you're seeing the rain falling down, or, you know, what you have to go through physically as a photographer to get there. And then you add altitude sickness. If anybody's ever had it, fortunately I haven't, but it is horrible. It is not a great condition to have if you move up in elevation, you know, way too quickly. So lessons learned there too. Beautiful work.
No one else had any issues. It was just me.
That's okay. All right, you brought up CES before, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but nobody else was up there speaking except you. In the famous year at CES when the lights went out and you blew the electricity in the state of Nevada, in the city of Las Vegas, and CES, the electronics show, was shut down because there was no electricity. Thanks to you. Well, we can't give you that complete credit, but you were on stage, and you did carry on a great program even after that in the dark while people were still sitting there. You've been on a bit of a portrait run lately as a part of what you were doing. I've been following you on Facebook and Instagram. And I mentioned earlier, you're not just a wildlife photographer, you're very diverse in your photography. Did I freeze again?
I have no idea what you just said.
It's cool though, because I was giving you such props, and I'm not going to say it again because it came out so eloquently. I've been talking about the versatility of you as a photographer and that you've been shooting since the pandemic started. I've seen and followed a lot of your work on Instagram. This is good. It's like I get to rehearse what I'm actually doing in the moment. This is phenomenal. But you know, these are some serious photos, a portrait series that you're working on. I've seen them posted on Instagram and Facebook. Talk a little bit about what you're doing during these times in order to stay creative.
Yeah, I came home from Uganda and Tanzania, and then I went out west to photograph the wolves, the coastal wolves. And I came home the day everything changed. I went into self-isolation for a couple of weeks, and then we were told that we had longer. And like everyone else, I stayed put. I was going outside every time that it was snowing, because we had snow until 2 weeks ago. Every time it was raining, I was looking for birds. I was looking for anything. Walking every day, trying to stay somewhat positive, scared like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
All my travel, all my speaking engagements, everything were canceled. What, we were all dealing with our different levels of holy doodle, what are we going to do with our lives and how are we going to get through this?
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed at home, and then I started going through my image bank. I started creating the slide. I started using the D850 and the 60 mil and the slide unit, the copier. I
Mm-hmm.
went back. I discovered some new images that really helped me transform into the photographer that I am. And 5 weeks later, I was like, I have to go and document this. This is crazy. I've got to go downtown and see what this is like. And I went to our downtown streets, and it was eerie, it was sad, it was crazy. I was overwhelmed. Ran into a friend. She has a store in our Byward Market. We shared a real tearful, raw conversation about our future, business, being business women in the city. And I looked at her and I said, "Can I take your photo?" So I photographed. This is not, I'm clearly not her. I sat her down in front of her store. She had her dog, and Mandy is typically very vibrant, tall, beautiful, this mane of gray, curly, stunning hair, and always full of life. And it was a very sombering image. I mean, how can she be anything but, with her mask? And
Mm-hmm.
then my husband is a fire chief, and he was telling me that night about how they go to fire calls now, and because they're saving the N95 masks for the hospitals, because of the shortage that we have, they go into their medical calls with their SCBAs like this. This is how they go to a medical call. This is
Mm-hmm.
how they dress. And so I asked if I could photograph. He volunteered Sarah, and I took this image, and I think it was one of those real transformational images, and it will be a big part of my story, a big part of me as a photographer. And I just said I have to continue. I have to share some stories, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I posted my 40th one every single day. I'm photographing homeless, business,
Mm-hmm.
reporters, firefighters, paramedics. I posted a bus driver today. I'm shooting with a carbon filter, so I'm seeing in black and white. I think our world
That,
right
that
now.
that's a picture control, right? I mean, that's really cool. Again, we're not here to sell anything, but I've been playing with the different picture controls, and carbon is one of my favorites to create this sort of really cool black and white effect.
Well, and you get the color in your raw, and the one thing that is so amazing is that it takes you, what you're creating, seeing black and white. That's a
Yeah,
whole different concept than taking a picture in color and looking at the back of your camera. When
yeah.
you're seeing, I think it takes me back to my fine art Ottawa U stage, and when we had to photograph in just black and white, and I
Mm-hmm.
just, and I think we're living in a black and white world right now. We're full of deep shadows, bright highlights, and lots of gray zones. And I'll transition sooner or later back into, maybe part two will be color. But for
Right.
now, I have a few more to go. And you owe me a selfie with a mask, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I just hope people um, feel something when they look at these images. We're all in this together. We know that. And all these people have incredible stories to tell, from farmers. I mean, we are all affected worldwide, every single aspect of our lives. There's not one of us. And I think that for our generation this is something that we've never experienced before. So I post every day on Facebook, Michelle Valberg Photography, and I also created a Planet Hope Canada Instagram page that is updated. Twitter, LinkedIn, I'm everywhere. I'm posting every single day.
Gotcha. I mean, it's an extraordinary way to keep yourself going. I went out one day and I wanted to start photographing people and what was going on, and I found gloves and masks all over the grounds and in shopping carts, and it was an immediate downer for me. And I realized that there are a ton of great journalists out there like you making and documenting those types of photos, which is what led me to the backyard and the piece of photographing small birds, which was a challenge to me because maybe you as the wildlife expert here can attest to the fact that if you're looking to be sane, photographing small things that move faster than the speed of light is not exactly the way to do it, but it's kept me going. We hope those of you tuning in really go follow Michelle's work. It's phenomenal. It's just a great body of work, so versatile, And as you've seen from some of these pictures you've shared, you have some great, great stories to tell about the images. So we can't thank you enough for your time and coming on the Creators Hour and all of the things you do for Nikon, but you know, what you're doing in conservation and the stories you tell. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, well, please stay safe, you and your husband and family. Please keep shooting pictures and posting them because they're just so inspirational. Those of you that are tuning in, thank you for spending this time, a special conversation with Canadian Ambassador, Nikon Ambassador Michelle Valberg. Check out our work. Go to the Nikon USA site, nikonusa.com/creators hour to get a feel for all of the great content that's being created. It is our mission to inspire you, to keep you motivated. We are making the transition back into a different kind of normal now, and we hope that everybody takes what they've learned and goes and puts it to use, and share your pictures with us. We would love to see them. So thank you everybody for tuning in. For Nikon, I am Mike Corrado. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you soon.